So this morning I was meditating a little more on, well, just meditating actually, but looked across at the tree I've got here, which is beautifully in blossom at the moment, and it struck me that it was a fairly good metaphor for this discipleship discussion that we've been having. It looks like a flowering cherry tree, but it's actually a peach tree, and so the blossoms on a peach tree, on this tree anyway, they represent stage one faith, intuitive faith. Really pretty, really lovely. It's the same level of intuitive, instinctive trust that a baby has, trusting its parents to care for it. A baby doesn't think about whether a parent is trustworthy, doesn't assess character, doesn't get CVs, just trusts, born to trust. And it's a beautiful thing and a fragile thing as well, as these blossoms are. But it's kind of a precondition to what we might call kind of a genuine faith, in the sense that it doesn't have any content about what this faith that might, a faith in God might look like. It doesn't know God, doesn't understand God, hasn't faced challenging questions, in the same way that it doesn't know how to trust its parents beyond the instinct that it's born with. Now that blossom needs to be pollinated in order for it to set fruit and become something more than just a blossom, but a fruit, a peach that we'd want to eat one day. So it's a fragile thing. It's a beautiful thing, but it's fragile, and it passes. And when it passes into stage two, it's this hard little fruit, a genuine and real peach, but certainly by no means the finished product. And this is, tracking very much with natural development of a child. It's when the child goes to primary school and asks questions, or receives information about the world that wasn't present in this kind of pre-world existence when it was raised in the family home. Going to school, you were introduced to all sorts of ideas. And you come home from school and say, Mum and Dad, you didn't have a clue about this. My teacher said. So you're beginning to identify that there is bigger things in the world than just simply what your parents have taught. You're beginning to reason, and it's a fairly rudimentary reason. There's no high-level conceptual reasoning at this point by any means, but it's the beginning of thinking. It's the beginning of reasoning and judging and assessing. And of course, within a faith environment, the child is beginning to assess and judge what they understand to be this thing we call God, and recognizing it as beyond simply a faith in faith itself, this pre-faith intuition to trust. The faith is beginning to take content, and a lot of that content comes from the stories that are told. And in Sunday school, we get the stories that we're told about the Israelites, and about our faith fathers like Abraham and King David, and all of these incredible people, and of course Jesus centrally. These incredible stories about real people who had real experiences of God, and we take them in as giving us content as well of what we understand God to be like now because of these stories and how God has interacted with these people's lives. So we're learning at this sort of very rudimentary but very real level. And stage three is, imagine that fruit has continued to grow in knowledge, and now this peach is real size. It's kind of what the finished product size will be like. And think of it in a physical sense. This child has gone through its teen years. It's now fully grown. It's adult size, if you like. But there's still a lot of maturing and developing to happen in this person. And a peach that's full size is by no means at that point necessarily fully ripe. You wouldn't want to pick it yet, because it's got a long time to hang on that branch and hang in the sun, in a hot summer sun, which will mature that fruit, and receiving all of that life and sap from the tree that will bring it into full maturity and full ripeness, which is really what we want. And that's the kind of stage three moving to stage four kind of stuff, when it looks and feels like if we were peaches, we were hanging on the tree doing nothing, and what was a comforting place to be, looking around going, well, I know who I am. I'm a peach, and I'm one with all these other peaches, and I am nourished by this peach tree and the deep roots of history that are there, and the stories, if you like, and all that makes me a peach comes from this environment, and I take comfort from that. There comes a time, this is possibly why peaches don't have consciousness, because if you were hanging on the tree as a peach and you had consciousness, you might start to think, what on earth is the point of this? I'm a peach. nothing is happening now. I was once a blossom, but then I moved into that fruit moment, and I was a tiny little fruit, and then I grew, and now I'm a fully grown peach, aren't I? Why am I just hanging here doing nothing? It's a kind of an existential crisis for a peach at this point, just as it is for maturing adults who feel like perhaps they've got everything together. They've got a family, a career, and they're serving in their community, and they're doing all these things, but they don't feel like they're growing anymore. They feel like they've stalled, and nothing's progressing. And all the work is sort of invisible, but absolutely crucial, because a peach picked too early is hard and it's sour. It makes your stomach churn, really, to try and digest that. And a Christian that at stage 3 can be a bit hard still, and they can be a bit stomach churning in their opinionatedness. They can be black and white about some things, unloving in a lot of ways, kind of rough and ready, fully grown in a sense. Like they've got a lot of knowledge about the faith, but God hasn't softened their heart. And the stage 4 process is that ripening and maturing. It's really important to point out, I think, at this stage, 2 things. One, if as a child, you had this natural instinct to trust, but your parents betrayed you in a profound way. I'm not talking about perfect parenting here, but just, good parenting is good enough, as they say, and I think it's a true statement. But some children are deeply betrayed. It could be a divorce, it could be an abusive situation, or just really neglect. I mean, rich families, they look like they've got it all together, but sometimes the riches mean that those parents are working really, really hard and not around, and they outsource their parenting to all sorts of other activities, and the children are left feeling like they're not loved enough. If that's been the experience of you just growing up as a human, feeling like you wanted to trust but it just never happened, your trust mechanism will be broken down, and it'll be really hard to move into those other spiritual stages. You'll feel like that, if you don't have an earthly father you can trust, it'll be very, very hard to trust the Heavenly Father, who will encourage you to move on in life, to move on from some sources that seem trustworthy, and to instead of trusting your church as if it was your faith, instead of trusting the Bible as if it was your faith, instead of trusting your discipleship processes as if that was your faith, the Father in His love will lead you away from those as reliable and stable and consistent sources of nourishment, and encourage you to see that in fact it's God Himself who's been nourishing you, the Father. But you won't go there. You'll resist that if you've never had a real example of trust. You've never had that trust mechanism built and developed properly. So it's important to recognize that. It might be that if you're stumbling in stage 3, which often happens for lots of reasons, but one of them might be you've just got real big scars. You've got issues with your parents that have never been dealt with, mother or father, or both. And it might be that you need to address those well before you think about successfully being able to transition to stage 4. The second thing I really want to say is that there is no stage that is more holy than another. You can be at stage 1, and if you are honest and open, and stage 1 is pre-faith in a way, so it's a bit silly, but maybe stage 2 and stage 3, if those are places where you would naturally be, and it's unreasonable to expect that you'd have grown beyond those points at that stage in your life, and you were honest with that and open to God in those stages, then that is as holy a place to be as at stage 6 right at the end, because you can only be at the stage you're at, and provided that you are continuing to trust God and continuing to live an authentic and open life before God in that stage and allowing Him to be God in that stage, it's as holy a place as any other. I mean, you can't go through life without going through those stages. You can't mature spiritually without going through all the stages. And so each one is precious and important and necessary in its own right. And that needs to be said, because this is not a journey of going from an unholy person to a holy person. It is about spiritual maturity, and each stage is a stage of holiness, decreed in a sense by nature and by God for the maturing of His saints. So stage 4 is that maturing process, the ripening process, becoming softer and sweeter, because the stage 5 and 6 ultimately is, if in stage 3 and 4 you take a lot of comfort from being surrounded by peaches, and you're not an apple, you're not a banana, you're not some strange berry, you're a peach, and there's comfort in knowing that. Well, stage 5 in a way is being content that if you were pulled off that tree for whatever reason and put in a fruit bowl with other weird fruits, you would realize, you would know that you're still a peach. It wouldn't threaten you. You wouldn't suddenly think, am I a banana now? You would know that you are a peach contributing to the variety of fruits available. And don't read me wrong, I'm not saying the variety of religions available. I'm not talking about that, and don't press that point, because that's not where I'm going with this. But rather it's the point that that peach can go into the world, just as a Christian can go into the world, is if their faith is grounded in the Father and in God saying, you are my beloved child in whom I'm well pleased, then it doesn't matter whom you're with. Tax collectors, prostitutes, the classic Jesus prescription. You'll never lose yourself or lose your way. You might not be surrounded by all your other peaches, and that will be okay. And the final stage, this most, the most highly developed stage, and that comes, hopefully, is when the peach desires to be consumed, desires to be eaten, desires to be cut up and put into a fruit salad, because it knows, really, why am I a peach? To be eaten, to nourish others. I have a life. I have taken on all this richness so that I can be of good nourishment to others. Or as Jesus, or John the Baptist would say, I need to become less so that he becomes greater. And I think that's a way of thinking of our discipleship. We need to, our ego and our sense of needing to be important and present in the world needs to be slowly consumed and subsumed into the lives of others to say, actually it doesn't matter about me so much anymore. What matters is that I can help others grow, that I can be a contributor to others, that my life can be given in service to others. That's what matters now. And the ultimate, of course, is, again, quoting Jesus now, unless the seed is, if a seed doesn't get buried in the ground, it remains a single seed, but if it does get buried in the ground, it can be a much fruit. So too, that peach stone, that peach pit, if it gets buried, the flesh is consumed and the seed is buried, it might seem like the peach is completely gone, but it's given its life, its nourishment, its flesh to many others that they may be satisfied. And it will now have the potential of becoming another peach tree from which much fruit can come. That's kind of the ultimate kind of journey, if you like, of a disciple in spiritual maturity. And a lot of Christians, if you like, will get to stage 3 and be afraid of those other parts of the journey because they are scary, and there's a lot of darkness and disconcerting unknowings that happen in that journey that I'll unpack, I think, later. So as always, if you've got any questions or concerns or some feedback, or you want me to explain a little bit more, put that in the comments below, or send me an email if you have my email address. And I'll be back next time. I'll be talking more about this same kind of stuff, and at this point I'm thinking maybe I'll go into more of that kind of, what is that stage 3-4 transition. I think that's kind of a critical one to understand, because it's where a lot of people get stuck, and coming out of stage 4, if people go to the stage 4, there's another real kind of risk factor there as well, when actually sometimes, as good as it can be, there's a real risk of becoming self-centered, and so just sort of addressing some of that stuff as well. It's possibly where people end up if, they say that New Zealand, anyway, the biggest church in New Zealand is the unchurched. So there's a lot of believers who find that the established church is a very hard place to be. And so I think that's perhaps where some of that journey has gone. Now, it's not always the case, but we can look at that. The other thing I would probably want to talk about at some point along the way is looking at it as far as a moral development kind of thing. So the question of what drives us to do what is good and what is right. Is it sort of a fear of external punishment and following the rules and the comfort that we get by having clear rules that we can follow, so we can say, hey, look, I'm a real good person, I've done all the right things. And then the shift of what about the intrinsic drives, well, I do it because it's the right thing to do no matter what. And I'll even risk the wrath of my community if I truly believe it's the right thing, the God thing to do, no matter what, I'll do it. That marks a real shift in that spiritual journey as well, and I'm sure you can kind of see where that one's going, but worth spelling out a little, I think. So I'll leave it there for now. God bless. As I said, if there's any questions and queries, pop them down in the comments or send me an email, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.